please stand for the Dharma teaching?
Kiss one, especially for welcome everybody. Hello. Okay. So we'll start with refuge. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. So this afternoon I'm going to be teaching, or giving a teaching based on the praise to the three jewels. I think everyone's familiar with this because we recite it at our feast offerings. We recite it every morning session and we recite it every evening session. So have you all got it? If you want to refer to it.
Page A17, probably. No, it should be A15.
I don't know if you're all familiar with this little booklet called Mandala of Sacred Space, because in there you've got the morning and evening liturgies and then a commentary on all the liturgies, so that you can sometimes you can just reflect on the meaning of the words, and then when you come to recite them together, or if you're doing them in your own session, the meaning goes in deeper and deeper as those words go, as you learn them by heart and they're in your heart. And I find these three verses just keep yielding and yielding more richness as time goes on. They're extremely profound and yet quite short, and actually fairly free of jargon. You can actually, there's a few words, but once you've got those, it's like very accessible. And these three verses come from a text in Sanskrit called Ratnagotra Vibhaga. The Tibetans usually refer to it as the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, or for short, the Julama. And it's a very important text. It's the main text in the Tibetan tradition for introducing the teachings on Buddha nature, Tathagata. It's the text that I studied for my doctoral thesis, so it's the any of you who've had the courage to pick up Buddha Within, my doctoral thesis. It's actually all based on, it's all about this particular text. And the beginning of the text has got root verses and then commentarial verses on the root verses, and then even in its own there's a commentary that always goes together with it, which was found at the same time as the main text. And this then has further prose commentary on these 3 verses. And so those 3 verses, when you get the text, the actual text, they're split up. So you've got the verse, and then you've got all these commentarial verses, and then the next verse, and then the commentarial verses, and then the next verse, and then the commentarial verses. But the 3 main verses are so beautiful, and they sort of kind of stand on their own. And I felt, actually, I don't think there's anything that's in the whole text that goes beyond what's in those first 3 verses. It's really sums up the whole thing and makes so many points, and yet does it so beautifully and so economically. So I love these verses. Kind of, even when I had many teachings, very deep teachings and elaborate teachings, and then I pick up these 3 verses again, and I think they're not saying anything more than these 3 verses. So I hope you will all have some kind of real sense of connection with them. Most people who have heard about Mahayana Buddhism have heard about Prajnaparamita. Is there anyone who hasn't heard of Prajnaparamita? Some limited people haven't heard of it. It's sometimes called the perfection of wisdom. And in the mornings we recite the Heart Sutra. And this is quite a short sutra. The sutras are the words that are spoken by the Buddha or in his presence. And so the Heart Sutra is an example of a sutra, a Prajnaparamita Sutra, the perfection of wisdom. Wisdom here is shorthand for emptiness, the wisdom that realizes emptiness. So this is a very strong thread within the Mahayana Buddhist tradition. But there's also another thread which is called the Tathagata Sutras. These Tathagata means Buddha nature, basically. It's like the womb or the embryo within us that then becomes Buddha and is actually already Buddha in a sense, because like the child is already the being that is going to grow up and become like its parents. So it carries on the lineage, so it has a sense of lineage. But I think probably in English, Buddha nature, which is often given as a synonym for it, is kind of perhaps more intuitively accessible. Buddha nature, or we all have Buddha nature. We don't know what it means, but it sounds good. Sounds like, yeah, that sounds right. Which is, already shows that we have the intuitive wisdom of recognizing there's something very valuable about it. Well, not just human beings. It's all beings have Buddha nature. So for animal lovers everywhere, it's great. Our sense that animals also have this special nature is again confirmed as a valid intuition, really, by this recognition that all beings, including ghosts and spirits and demons and whatever you like to think of, they all have Buddha nature. And the question is, except for a vague sense of something good, what does Buddha nature actually mean? And how do beings move from their confused and sometimes quite, a dangerous and painful state of mind? How do they transform from that into their Buddha nature, the characteristic of which is to be, I suppose you'd have to say, to be completely perfect, happy, without suffering, full of good qualities such as compassion, wisdom, love, and every other good quality you can think of, intelligence and power to benefit others and to remove their suffering. All that's implied by Buddha nature. It's not as vague as something a bit good. It's actually ultimate goodness, Buddha nature. So that's more problematic, because just vaguely thinking that people are basically good, you can be a bit vague about that. But when you start saying they have Buddha nature, and then you read what the qualities of the Buddhas are, you think, well, they haven't, have they? But they're not manifesting. Not all beings are not manifesting these wonderful Buddha qualities. So how can you say that they have Buddha nature? That their real nature is Buddha. And this is a huge debate, really, within the Buddhist tradition itself. How literally are we to take this? Does it mean that we have a seed or a potential for that? Because that's more credible. But then seeds and potentials, the way we usually think of them, they are conditioned and changing and rather undependable. Whereas the Buddha nature is not changing and impermanent, conditioned and not dependable. It's totally dependable because it doesn't arise, it doesn't cease. It's Buddha. It's the Buddha nature. It's beyond anything that we can grasp with our ordinary way of understanding things. So when we try to understand things, I have Buddha nature, then we get an idea of what it is. I think, yeah, okay, I've got that. Don't try and tell me I haven't. It's kind of a bit holding on to an idea. And that actually would obstruct your coming to realize and understand what the Buddha nature really was, because you already have a preconceived idea of it. But you were right in a way, because you had an intuitive sense that made sense. So that was intuitively right. But what we need to learn to do through our practice, through our formless meditation practice in particular, but in general, in our Dharma practice, is to become more simple and less grasping in the way we try to understand things. So we're more willing to see that actually we haven't really understood it. It's just, I have an inspiration, but I don't really understand it. So I can't really form a concept of it, but I am inspired by it. So I'm keeping my heart open. I'm keeping my intelligence sort of, alert and awake to, at some time, I might actually come to truly recognize it. So there's a kind of openness about the way we think we have Buddha nature. It's like recognizing we can't really know what it is something that we can hold on to and know, because we are it. We can't get outside of ourselves and look at ourselves and think, I have Buddha nature, because we're not outside, we are it. So when we know it intuitively, and in a way, as soon as we grasp it, we've lost it. So it's a matter of trying to stay as simple as we can with our experience, and noticing when we're grasping. But it's important to know that when we let go of grasping, we'll know we've let go, because there will be a corresponding emergence of these qualities. It's like if you are very angry with somebody and you manage to kind of calm down and you're able to let go of your anger, actually, as you let go of the anger, you naturally feel very warm and positive. It's not a separate exercise. And if you're holding on to your anger and you're trying to develop warm and positive feelings about someone, if anyone's tried it, you'll know what it feels like. It's like one huge battle. So this looking at how you're conceptualizing things and grasping things in your mind, and just letting them become much lighter, letting them come and go, not holding on to them, as we do in the formless practice, naturally leads to positive states of mind. And people might think, well, you're just sitting doing nothing, so what good's that going to do? Because we have Buddha nature, it's going to do a lot of good. If we didn't have Buddha nature, you might think, well, you do better, going off and doing good things. But of course, if we go off doing good things busy, all our life, without stopping to settle and notice our clinging, even the good things we're doing become egocentric. And, we have words for that, don't we? Like, what's the word? Oh, what's the word they use? Lady Bountiful, sort of full of, good deeds, but at the same time also full of a lot of ego. And it has a correspondingly negative effect on yourself and others. So when we sit in meditation, formless meditation, which looks so, for people who don't have any idea what we're doing, it looks like we're not doing anything. But in actual fact, by letting go of grasping, the qualities are happening naturally. They're naturally going to start manifesting. And if they're not, then it's time to look at how you're doing the formless practice. It is possible to sit there thinking you're doing formless practice, when in fact you're holding on to an idea. You're holding on to an idea, which in a sense, that's why you need a teacher and you need a Sangha, you need people to accompany you on this journey, because without good guidance, it's very easy to develop the idea that I'm not angry. I'm not thinking about it at all. I'm not thinking about how angry I am. I can sit here peacefully without getting angry. I'm not even thinking about what you said to me. But of course, that can turn into something quite disconnected. You're not even listening when people try to tell you what's wrong with you. You're not even listening because you're blocking it out with your piece of, you're overlaying your concept of what peaceful would be. So it's a very important message on the one side, that the reality of our true nature, and in fact the nature of the universe, which is ungraspable and empty and can't be understood with that grasping mind, and yet is known, but it isn't known as something separate from the mind that knows it. So there's that side, which is the Prajna Paramita. And if that was the only teaching you had, you might well think you'd understood it before you really had. And the Tathagata Sutras make the point that if the Buddha qualities are not manifesting, then you haven't actually let go of all grasping. There's still some subtle grasping there. And some of that very subtle, actually, very hard to detect. Your mind has to become very tamed and peaceful and clear and focused to even notice that more subtle kind of clinging. And yet that subtle clinging is supported everything else. So as long as that subtle clinging is there, then actually the whole edifice, however much you chop back on the gross concepts and grasping, it will always come up again, because there's this deep, subtle mistake, if you like, that we're making it, that is the avidya. You know the word avidya? It's a key Buddhist term, and it's often translated as ignorance. Ignorance. It's more like non-recognition. It's like not recognizing your true nature. So it's which is negative, not vidya, not knowing, not recognizing. And so when you do recognize your true nature, or the true nature recognizes itself, you could say, somehow, it's not dualistic, that's called vidya. That's like, in Tibetan it's called rigpa. And some of you might have heard this word rigpa. It's there's a big Buddhist center called rigpa with lots of branches everywhere. But this rigpa is vidya, which is the opposite of avidya. I've forgotten where I was going. Where was I going with that? Start to come up, yeah. So that, yeah, they're all the qualities that are associated with the removal of the avidya and the recognition of vidya. Vidya recognizes its own nature. So, and this idea of, it's not the kind of knowing where there's one knower and a thing known and they're separate, which is very much the way we tend to think in general and in the West. It's quite strong, this idea of the thinker and the physical world that's separate from it, and that there's not really much idea what the thinker is. But somehow it's not the same as the physical world. Or if it is the same as the physical world, it loses all its qualities. It becomes like a physical, everything's physical. Like there's one way of trying to explain why you don't know what the mind is because there isn't one. It's just the brain and, you know, like physical things. Which is a bit funny because physical things is what isn't, you know, isn't mental. So if mental is actually physical, then you've only got one class of things anyway. So. It's something called non-dual. It's not dual. It's not a separate seeing of something seen. And then how do you describe that? Sometimes it's described as non-dual. Sometimes it's described as self-knowing or auto-seeing. It doesn't quite work in English. But I think maybe even self-knowing, self-seeing doesn't quite work. I've struggled, as a translator, I've struggled with this for decades to find a suitable way of translating this. I suppose non-dual awareness doesn't sound too bad, but it's not the kind of term you would use in everyday conversation, is it? Yeah, so we're stuck with a kind of technical sounding word for the most important thing in our life, if you like, which is a pity. So that's why I've, with the Shikpo indeed, presented the whole idea of our true nature as openness, clarity, and sensitivity. This is actually the way it's presented in the Mahamudra and the Dzogchen tradition. And the beauty of it is that actually does mean something to us straight away. These are words we would use in you know, among ourselves, you know, like being more open, being more clear, being more sensitive. It's already a natural way of talking, and the idea that one could take that initial intuitive sense that that's good, or even practical sense that that's good, to very deep, its deepest level, which would be this, you know, non-dual awareness, if you like. That's when you can recognize that your nature is openness or emptiness, clarity or awareness, sensitivity, responsiveness, goodness, all the qualities of goodness. Then when you recognize they're not separate, that they are actually different aspects of our true nature, which are never separate from each other, they're always there, then actually you're just using different words for this non-dual awareness, or this self-knowing awareness. You're getting very close to it. The deeper you go into what is in the heart essence tradition, it's called the indestructible heart essence. Again, it's another way of talking about our true nature. I don't know whether indestructible heart essence resonates very well with you. Sometimes people feel, well, essence sounds like very, you know, brought down to the smallest thing, rather than what's essentially your true nature. But maybe indestructible is quite resonant, and heart is very resonant, isn't it? So indestructible heart, the essence, the quintessence, or the where that's coming from somehow. Again, non-dual awareness, or vidya, or all these technical words do have a use, but they can also be a little bit off-putting, especially when translated, until whatever translation we end up with becomes natural, because it's been incorporated into our language. Like, for example, in Tibetan, they took Sanskrit words. They had to translate Sanskrit words which didn't resonate in Tibetan, and they had to struggle to find words. Like, for example, the first line of these 3 verses is awakened. Nama Buddha, self-awakened, having awakened, awakening others. Sort of, it's all about awakening. And in Tibetan, they obviously couldn't use it because it didn't resonate with anything other than waking up from sleep. Mm-hmm. And they obviously didn't use it as a metaphor for something more grand. That's my conclusion, because they translate it. They've got words for waking, but they don't use them. For in Sanskrit, it would be Buddha or Bodhi. Maybe related to our word bud, opening, awakening. But obviously in Tibetan, it just sounded like, the awakened one sounded like someone who's just got up. So they changed it to one who's fully blossomed, fully purified and fully blossomed with all the good qualities. Which, of course, when you try to say that in English, it's quite cumbersome. So it's really nice translating these 3 verses back from the Sanskrit. Because when I saw in the Sanskrit it was all Buddha and Bodhi, I just thought, oh, we can do the same in English. You can say awakened one. Somehow the awakened one sounds like something, doesn't it? The awakened one sounds like something grand. So you can use it in English. So very interesting, the whole process of translating. So I've kind of given a commentary before giving you the lines. So does somebody want to read out the whole of the first verse?
Namo Buddha, self-awakened, who is peace, beginningless, without middle, without end, having awakening the unawakened, revealing the eternal fearless path, holder of the Vajra sword, the wisdom and compassion that breaks the wall of doubt, concealed in the dark confusion of wrong views. You are the only one who cuts the shoots of suffering at their source.
So there's some lovely images there, isn't there? It's the image of the Vajra sword. There's an image of Manjushri there holding his sword. Can you just, Jonathan, can you just hold up that image?
Maybe give it to the Lama so that people on TV.
Oh yes. So here we are. Here we have Manjushri with his Vajra sword, his sword of wisdom. So that there's a sutra actually of Manjushri with his sword of wisdom going to kill the Buddha. And the Buddha saying, no, not like that. If you want to kill me, just grasp onto yourself. You know, ego clinging is what kills me. You know, swords are not going to do it. It's a great sutra. But this idea of the Vajra sword, yeah, this one's got a Vajra on the end of it, look. Kind of the indestructibility of the Vajra. And with this sword of wisdom, of recognizing the true nature within oneself, it gives one the power to realize the true nature of others. And therefore you can connect to the true nature of others and destroy all their confusion and clinging arising from their not recognizing it. So that's a power that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have, both in the sense of they can teach the truth and transmit the truth and transmit the power of the realization to their pupils, but they also have a power, various powers actually, it's part of the qualities that we're talking about that we have these powers that simply we can influence beings in myriad ways. Some are obvious and practical, and some are simply by our presence or by our wishing or by our prayers. We can actually affect the world. We can affect, we can remove the sufferings of others. We do have that power. And if our own power is obscured by our confusion and ego clinging, grasping, that limits that power. So to the extent that we cut through our own confusion and ego clinging, our power to cut through that of others increases. And the Buddha, of course, has reached the pinnacle of being able to do that. So he's the holder of the Vajra sword, Vajra, the indestructible. That Buddha nature can't be destroyed, but it can destroy everything else. It can destroy all confusion and clinging, eventually. Unfortunately, not just like that. Otherwise, they'd have done it a long time ago. Or, from one point of view, of course, they have done it, but it's taking us a long time to catch up with them. So from our point of view, it doesn't happen instantaneously, although from their point of view it does, which is kind of interesting. But I'll get into a whole different discussion if I go down that route. So it starts off with Namo Buddha. Namo means hello, basically. You greet somebody, hello. Greetings. Yeah, welcome or whatever. Yeah, hello. Namo Buddha, and then describing the Buddha. And it's not describing the Buddha as a historical person, although obviously it's not saying, you're not addressing the Buddha, the historical Buddha, because the historical Buddha is an example of a Buddha. And Buddhas are all pervading, so the historical Buddha is actually there to say Namo to. So you could think of it as being the historical Buddha, or you could think of it as being your own Buddha nature, or you could think of it as being the Buddha nature of all Buddhas. So you can think of it how you like, really, whatever comes to you on the day, as it were. I find it's a different, it's different thought each day, really, different aspect each day. Sometimes it's more particular Buddha or a particular manifestation of Buddha. Sometimes it's more just the fact of awakening being the nature, true nature of everything. The Dharma Buddha self-awakened, and this is I've already talked about why this term self-awakened is used. It's not separate. There's not a separate awaken. It's not a person who then realizes something. It's something realizes its own nature. So self-awakened. Who is peace? Who or what is peace? That is, peace here means the cessation of all suffering, which is the cessation of all confusion, is the cessation of all trying to grasp. It's the way of knowing which is so completely simple that there is no disturbance and no. It's so simple that it's just well-being. It's peace. No more. We talk of, don't we, peace of mind, peace of heart, peace. You might never have experienced it, but still, I think it resonates, peace. It's not like when you say peace, it has a very strong sense of positive qualities. It's not just kind of the ending of all the noise, and it has a struggle and problems. It has a very strong resonance of something really, wow, at last, which is peace. So it's actually the same as nirvana. Nirvana is peace. So it is nirvana. So Buddha is nirvana, you could say. The Buddha isn't different from nirvana. She's peace. And nirvana is from Buddha, has no beginning, has no middle, has no end. Anything that has a beginning and a middle and an end has been, if you like, it's been conceptualized as having a beginning, middle, and end. You have to have a concept of a beginning and of a middle and an end. And then when you look at the concept of a beginning, middle, and end of anything, it's very difficult to work out what you really mean. But if ultimate reality had a beginning, what would have been before it? More ultimate reality or less? It doesn't work, does it? And if ultimate reality ended, what would be then afterwards? Something that was less than ultimate reality or more ultimate reality? Well, it doesn't work, and in between either. If there's no beginning and no end, then there's not an in between either. It's not in time. Time is a conceptual construction that we add on to reality. So this sometimes Buddhist commentators who don't really like this Buddha nature teaching, they say, well, this Buddha nature without beginning, middle, and end, it's kind of an eternal, it's sort of clinging to the idea that there's an eternally existent something, and the Buddha taught everything's impermanent, so this must be wrong. But actually the Buddha's taught that everything conditioned was impermanent, and the nirvana was always taught to be non-conditioned, and non-conditioned things don't have beginnings, middles, and ends. So in that sense you could say they're eternal, but that doesn't mean that you can grasp it as something existent. It's not known in that way. So You have to learn this very subtle point to answer people who try to tell you that the Buddha said there wasn't anything that was not conditioned. In fact, the Buddha taught quite the opposite. Conditioned, impermanent things are unsatisfactory and are to be left behind. And what is to be realized is nirvana, which is peace, which has all the qualities of bliss and love and compassion and so on. And it doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end, which of course implies it's already here, which implies Buddha nature. So that's us. So the ungraspable Buddha nature, without beginning, middle, or end. I love that. Every morning when we do, every time we do it, that really works for me, that way of putting it. Without beginning, without middle, without end. Having awoken, is it the next one? Having awoken, awakening the unawakened. Yeah. So the unawakened being us. And we're not recognizing our true nature entirely. I mean, yes, we have a bit of a intuition and maybe increasingly confident in it, but there's a lot of wavering going on, and the Buddhas are helping us naturally because they're all pervading. Not only do they not have a beginning, middle, and end in time, they don't have beginning, middle, and end in terms of space either. They're not anywhere. They're everywhere. So they're here, helping us to understand, helping us to have a situation like this where we can talk about these things. All those conditions have come together through the help of the Buddha, and we can look to those Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in our own lineage who've actually made this possible. But there's also the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who've helped us to get here. We're all with that help has enabled this to happen. And of course, our own nature of Buddha, which is recognizing this and is drawn to it, is also working towards it. So having awoken, even if we've woken only a little bit, that little bit is wakening the rest of us that's still not awakened. So awakening the unawakened. Hold of the Vajrasattva. What is the next one? No, something as a fearless path. Revealing the eternal fearless path. So path here is the Dharma, which is, you could say it's the teachings, but more than the teachings, it's actually the truth of what's being taught. So that the truth that's being taught and is to be realized is the path. It's by coming to understand that truth that we progress along the path. It's a path towards a deeper understanding. And that truth that we're coming to understand is the truth, the fearless, eternal, that's right, eternal truth of a fearless path, a path that leads to fearlessness, the end of all suffering, the end of all danger. It's also fearless in the sense that to follow it, we need to be fearless. We need to be brave enough to face the truth. So it's got different senses of fearlessness there. Fearless path. Now it comes the holder of the Vajra sword. And the two qualities that are emphasized here are the wisdom and the compassion. So the sword is it's an image for a very active compassion. It's not the warm, cuddly kind of compassion. It's the compassion that's going to cut us free, you could say. It's going to cut us free, and therefore it's very active. The Vajra sword, and the Vajra is also like a thunderbolt, like the weapon of Indra. It has tremendous destructive power. So Our confusion is going to be confronted with what's going to destroy it. It might not like that. It might not always like that. Well, it certainly won't like it. But that other part of us that wants to awaken will like it. But in order to awaken, we have to let go of that part of ourselves that doesn't want to be woken, actually. So it's kind of like, might feel a bit aggressive, a bit threatening. Dharma can be very scary, actually. Be very scary, the way it arises in your experience, or the way it's presented through the teachings, or the way the teacher is. Oh, I'm going to go and hide. But, Manjushri with his sword, once you've aroused him and given him just a little chink, he'll come in after you. Wisdom and compassion that breaks the wall of doubt. I think this is a wonderful image, a wall of doubt. The doubt is the avidya. We're not recognizing our own nature. We doubt it. We doubt our own goodness. We doubt our own Buddha nature. That's why we're here as unenlightened beings, because if we didn't doubt it, we would recognize it and have confidence in it, and that would be it. We'd be Buddhas. Why aren't we? Because we doubt it. Immediately, we doubt it for start. From where we are now, we think, well, I don't even understand what it is. So of course I doubt it. Of course we doubt it. But not only that, as we start to unpick the tangle of wrong views that are kind of have grown, it's like a castle in a forest, isn't it? Like Sleeping Beauty. There's a castle in the forest, and there's this forest of thickets of all these different wrong views that are able to thrive because of this wall of doubt. And so you don't even get to the doubt because you've got too much else going on. You've got confusion and distraction and all sorts of things that you want and grasping, and you're not even interested in removing this tangle of these. So that first of all, that has to be cut through. And then when you cut through all this thicket of wrong views, which are relatively easy to remove, you hit this wall of doubt that even though you've heard all the teachings and you really want to understand them and you're really giving your time to practicing it, even then, somehow you encounter underneath it all this subtle layer of holding on, that you don't really believe you could be different from who you are now. You believe what you are now, and you can't believe you have this Buddha nature, and you can't quite trust the fullness practice. It must need more, something else that I haven't yet found. And because we are always sliding off our intuition, it's true, because we're not simple enough yet. So the wall of doubt actually makes us complicated. We make it too complicated, and if we didn't make it complicated, we'd probably slide off altogether. We'd probably, sort of drift off. So we try not to drift off and to home in on it, and as we home in on it, we give ourselves a job to do, get busy with it, and it seems to be helping a bit, and then it gets to this point where you realize you've hit a wall of doubt. I think they make a feature of this in some Zen schools, don't they? The great doubt, where you really hit that wall of why are you not believing or not recognizing your own nature, because there's nothing else. You've let go of everything else, so why is nothing happening? And this is this subtle level of very strongly held and reinforced from the Buddhist tradition's point of view. It's been reinforced over lifetimes, this sense of not recognizing and defending oneself from recognition. One feels threatened, because if you let go of what you think you know, you wouldn't be anything. And that's very threatening. You know, I'd have no control. I wouldn't be anything. So some part of you doubts that that's the way to go. It's quite strong. And this is why you really need to, you know, you need the presence of the Buddha and faith in the Buddha to convince you that it's going to be all right, that you can let go. And there is something that you can take refuge in. So it's a very strong sense that the more you can feel the presence of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and forget about your doubt, the more it can actually dissipate. But if you try to hit your own doubt, you make it worse because you're attacking yourself. So in some ways you have to look the other way to let it go. You have to actually let go into what's within the tradition is called Shraddha, which is usually translated as faith. I think rightly so, but faith in English now has not got a good resonance for people. So it's faith in a particular understanding of what faith is. It doesn't mean blind belief at all. It means quite the opposite. It's very open, very awake, and it's courageous. Not a blind belief where you're holding on to your idea and you're not going to let go. It's like completely the opposite. So that's the first verse. Does one need anything more? Namo Buddha, self-awakened, who is peace, beginningless, without middle, without end, having awakening the unawakened. The power that goes with the realization of awakening to one's true nature. Awakening the unawakened. Revealer of the eternal, fearless path, holder of the Vajra sword. He holds the Vajra sword. Well, I don't know if it's he, she, it. The holder of the Vajra sword, the wisdom and compassion that breaks the wall of doubt. That wall of doubt has to be shattered, and the Buddha has the power to take us to that point where it's shattered, where it shatters itself. It's really, sometimes it's called yoga or union. You become one with the Buddha, and then you just let go of self-clinging and your doubts. You just let go of the doubts just from contemplating the Buddha. We're reading the Avatamsaka Sutra, the last part of the Gandavyuha, where Sudana is going from one teacher to the next. And his practice all the way is to praise the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. He's praising the qualities of the teachers that he's just visited, and the one that he's just going to visit. I think there's about 36 of them. And all he's doing is contemplating their qualities and just marveling at their qualities. He's not thinking about himself at all. He's only thinking about the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and of his teachers. And then at the end of the journey, where he finally meets Maitreya, he's still doing this. He's still prostrating and praising and marveling at the Dharma and at the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas and their qualities. And then Maitreya then praises him, because by being so focused on their qualities, those qualities now are in him. They've awoken in him through his contemplating them in others, which is a wonderful message for how the Buddhas break the wall of doubt about one's own worthlessness and feebleness and uselessness. They break it by manifesting the qualities of the Buddhas and getting you to, come on, look. If you look long enough, you will become like that. So that's a wonderful message. How the Buddhas break that wall of doubt. How it finally breaks. It does break. And then as it breaks, then recognition happens. Then you know what the Dharma truly is. What the Dharma here means, yes, teaching, but it also really means the true nature of reality that's being taught and being revealed. So then we come to the second verse, which is in praise of the Dharma. And here there's this wonderful image of the sun. It comes up all through the Buddhist tradition, right from the early Pali Sutras right through to Vajrayana and Dzogchen and Mahamudra. The image of the sun is used again and again, and it's used, of course, in the Tathagata Sutras, like the Dharma, our Buddha nature, true nature of reality, doesn't change. It's non-conditioned. It's ungraspable. It isn't known by our ordinary way of knowing things, and it's always present. So, like, how come we can't see it then? Well, it's there, but it's like when the sun is in the sky and the sky is covered in clouds. The sun doesn't go anywhere just because there's clouds. But from our point of view, it's gone. There's no sun today. It's not shining. But of course, it's not true, is it? What we really mean is there's so many clouds in the sky, I can't see it. And then even when it does peep through, we think, oh, there was a flash of sun. Missing the point. We just saw how things really are for a moment. And the fact that it only seemed like a moment was because of all the clouds, not because the sun disappeared. It didn't actually do anything. It didn't go behind the clouds. It just stayed where it was. And the clouds just seemed sailing by. So that's where confidence is so important. To change our view from thinking, oh, these little moments of insight, these little instances of compassion and love and good qualities, they come and go. It's really to change our thinking. They don't come and go. The negative qualities come and go. The things that obscure it come and go. But the actual good qualities don't come and go. They're always there. As soon as the clouds are gone, they're there again. You don't need to go and get them from anywhere. So that's a very wonderful, positive message. The sun, Dharma, the sun. So we're in the presence of Buddha nature, of the Dharma, of truth, of reality. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to let us down. It's like totally reliable. So any little glimpse of it, you can really take as being a sign that is there and is reliable. I like the image of this light at the end of a tunnel. If you're trapped, I imagine, what it would be like to be trapped in something. And then, you don't know, is there a way out? And then you see light at the end of the tunnel. And okay, it might disappear again, but you've seen it. You know that's the way to go because that's where there is a way out. And that doesn't change. I mean, that's the whole of everything that's out there. Okay, it appeared just for a flash for you, but that's enough to orientate yourself to. So you can think of it like that as well, sun, because the sun is shining at the end of the tunnel. Sun. 100,000 suns, that's another image they use. Like the Vajrasattva or Avalokiteshvara, they shine like 100,000 suns. Can you imagine? I can't. But I think of the sun and then I think, more than that. A lot more than that. I don't know, in some ways it's quite silly, isn't it? Because you can't really, I can't really imagine it, but even just saying it, there's that intuitive sense that it could go further, it could go that much further. There's nothing stopping it really becoming mind-blowingly amazing sun, and then comes this little 4 lines, which is not non-existent, nor is it other than these two, impossible to analyze, escaping all description and realized by the self alone. So that's shorthand for a lot of commentarial material from the Prajnaparamita Sutras on what does emptiness mean. And it's interesting that it starts with emptiness is not non-existence, because that's what we might think straight off, might we? So the Dharma is Prajnaparamita, it's emptiness. It's the true nature of reality, which is emptiness. But it's not non-existence. It's not, and the important point here is that when we say it's non-existent, we've tried to conceptualize it. So maybe we've had a very strong experience of emptiness, which could be very scary, because your whole world disappears and never had been there. And that can be very scary. You get a sudden flash of, everything you ever thought and everything you thought existed, none of it exists, and none of it did exist ever. It can be a very, very scary experience. Usually it doesn't last very long, because we have mechanisms for cutting out, preventing us experiencing too much truth or reality. But it can happen that, if you've been practicing, or maybe if you've been practicing in a past life, or even, I should imagine it also if you took drugs or something that would, you had some mental instability, that you could actually get a very strong experience of this emptiness. And this fear comes up that it's, non-existence. But the idea of non-existence is actually just a conceptual idea that follows on from the experience, but it follows on so fast you don't notice that actually emptiness was not non-existence. Non-existence is an idea that follows on, and then you spin off into fear reactions on the basis of that. It's at a very deep level. But in actual fact, that's not the full experience, because emptiness is not non-existence. But then you think, oh, good, that's all right. It's about, I do exist after all. You say, well, no, it's not existence either. It's both existence and non-existence are conceptual interpretations of experience, and they each imply the other. That if something can exist, then non-existence is also possible. But then non-existence is only possible if existence was possible, and existence is only possible if you conceptualize it. If you don't conceptualize it, you can't actually take it as an object of awareness. It's not dual in that way. So it's like, it can't be either. It can't be anything that you've conceptualized and taken as an object of awareness. It's, in a funny way, you can almost say you can't know it in the ordinary way that you think you know something. So you end up feeling you don't know anything, which is a good sign. Not in a kind of dismissive way, I don't know anything, but like, everything I thought I knew is invalid. There's nothing left. So it's very awake, very awake. You can't say anything about anything, which is a bit like modern physics as far as I can make out. They reach the stage where they realize they can't say anything about anything. So it's not surprising. It's not surprising that's what they'd find. But then it says not both and not other, because our minds are so clever that, our grasping mind is so clever, it sort of thinks to itself, oh, okay, it's, it's kind of exists and it doesn't exist. Yeah, I've got it, thank you. Okay, I understand now. It kind of exists and doesn't exist. That's just another idea, you're just trying, and then you try to get cleverer, even more clever. You say, it's neither existent or non-existent. Now I've got it. I've got it now, right? It's neither existent nor non-existent, which You could say, well, isn't that right? It is right, in a way, because how else are you going to describe it? But if you grasp that as a view, it's not right. You know, if you think, oh, well, it's not existent or non-existent, because existent and existent are concepts. So you're not going to catch me out. So I'm not going to say it's existent or non-existent. It's neither. Got the right answer. That must be the right answer. And even you're telling yourself, or even you like to kind of feel a bit superior, that you've got the high view, because you know it's not existent or non-existent. So anyone who says it is must be wrong. Actually, they're not necessarily wrong. It depends how they're using the words, whether they're using them to point to something that's genuine experience, or whether they're using the words to hold on to a view. And you can only tell whether a person's doing one or the other by what else they're saying and doing. When you meet them, you just listen to them and see how they're using the words and the way they're, their understanding. They could say something that technically is completely wrong, but you can tell by the way they say it that it's actually right, because words are not that accurate, actually. And the same word can, the same sentence can actually mean one thing and also its opposite. So there's really no substitute from, talking to a person one-to-one and listening carefully to what they're trying to say. And it's not a matter of getting the right formulation. If you formulate the right words, then you get a tick, you've got it right. It's not like that. It's like if you're looking at your experience in a very genuine way and then you try and describe it, the chances are, even though your words don't actually hang together, somebody listening to you can actually pick up something very precise from what you're saying. More often than not, I find when students are really struggling to find words, or even Rigzin Shikpa as well, when he's really struggling to find words, that's when he's transmitting most. I can pick up more meaning from that struggling for words than I can from carefully sort of honed and structured phrase, because words are not that accurate, but we are. The whole of our urge to communicate does communicate. It's very accurate, actually. It's the most accurate thing, and we can sometimes get our meaning across without using any words at all, and it's very accurate. Not necessarily, I mean, it depends on many things, but so these four are called the Chatuskuti. It was a standard way of holding a debate in India, I believe, at the time when these texts were being written. So it was being presented as, does this exist or not exist, or both or neither? And the opponent had to kind of answer, and then you'd find flaws with their argument. And it's a good way to sharpen up the debate. And so it comes up in a number of places in the discourses of the Buddha in different contexts, and in the Mahayana Sutras as well, and in the Madhyamaka as well. The four, sometimes it's translated as the four edges or the four extremes, and I like to translate it as the four conclusions. You come to a conclusion and you hold on to your view, and if you're holding on to a view, even if it's the right view, it's wrong. If that makes any sense. So not existent, neither is it, other than it's impossible to analyze. That's the whole point I've been making, isn't it? You can't actually analyze it and come down to, I know this is how it is. It's kind of like, okay, I can use words to point to it, but it itself cannot be analyzed with that analytical mind. It has to be known in another way, you could say more intuitive way, perhaps. Possible to analyze, escaping all description, and realized by the self alone, which I always feel very awkward about this line, because you know, Buddhism's so famous for teaching no self, and here I'm using it's realized by the self. Should I say the self? Should I say itself? It doesn't resonate. It's realized by itself. It doesn't quite do it. And if you say oneself, it sounds too psychological. You realize it for yourself is a bit kind of weak. So following the Sanskrit, I felt it was, you know, the Sanskrit doesn't have the in it. You don't have to have any article, but in English you do. So which article should I use? Realized by self alone, the self alone, a self alone, itself alone. I wonder about it. I said to Mixon, I think I should change it, and he said, no, it's good like it is, leave it. So lots of people have learnt it by heart now, so I think they would be very annoyed if I changed it. So realized by the self alone, in the sense that that just seemed to be, it doesn't actually say alone, it says realized by each by self-knowing awareness or something like that. But I just wanted to bring out that point, that it is only known by itself in itself. That's the only way it can be known. It can't be known in any other way. So I hope that line, at least it may be quite provocative, make people think. And then I've repeated again the Namo, because in the commentaries about this verse, it says that the first lines are referring to ultimate reality as the fruit of the path. That you're talking about emptiness of nirvana, it's non-existent, not existent, and so on. And then the second part of the verse is talking about Dharma as the path. So it's sometimes Dharma is talking about, same as the Buddha, the realization, what you realize is the Dharma, which is the Buddha. Sometimes it's talking about the Dharma that is the path to realizing Buddhahood. So when you're experiencing the nature of reality on the path, it's like a light that's guiding you. It's a light, the light of understanding. We say that, don't we? The light of understanding, that as we understand something better, it's like light has been shone, has shone on it, has been shone on it. So it's like the all-pervading brilliance of awakening reality shines through the clouds, and from our point of view, it's like things are brightening up. So it seems things were very, very dark and dull, and then they got lighter and lighter and brighter and brighter, and the sun started to come out. But of course, it isn't that the sun's coming out, it's that the clouds are going away. So on the path, it does seem like the sun is breaking through the clouds. So the rays of the sun seem to be striking us and lighting the path for us. And you could think that whenever you have an insight or penny dropping experience or some understanding or some Buddha quality starting to manifest more spontaneously, that it actually is the sun itself. It's a ray from the sun itself that's breaking through. Its rays banish darkness. And what's the darkness? The darkness is the fault. It's the flaw, F-L-A-W, of in our existence. It makes it not perfect. And what is the flaw in our existence that makes it not perfect? Is, what is the line?
The fault arising from attachment to various sense desires.
Yeah, it's because we've grasped we've grasped on to sense desires. Maybe that's not the best translation, but it's the objects of the senses. We've grasped onto them. Either we've grasped onto them as real, and we're either for them or against them. Either they're threatening us, or we want to attack them, or they're aggressive towards them, or we want to have them, we want to grasp them, we want to keep them, we want our security, or we're just dulling out. We're not going to let ourselves suffer because we're not going to experience things fully. But whatever it is, it comes from basically grasping at things as being different from me. They're different and outside of me, and I've got a relationship with them. I either want them or I don't want them. I want to just dull them out. And that's what's preventing us. What is it? The next line?
The thought arising from attachment.
Yes. And then the next line?
No, sorry.
Oh, I see. That's the last line. Okay.
None of his light of stainless wisdom has raised vanished.
That's it. Whose rays banished darkness. So this is the next image. You've got the sun, 100,000 suns. It's always there. And then you've got on the path this sense of being guided by a light that's coming from within yourself, a light that is actually coming to you from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, manifesting the teachings or removing obstacles, or in generally breaking through to us through our clouds, as it were. And those clouds are perpetuated by our grasping, sort of our greed, hate and delusion. They're perpetuated by that, and they are being penetrated by the sun of wisdom from both within and without. So then we come to the third verse. And this is the Sangha, this is the true Sangha. So we think of our Dharma friends and companions as being the Sangha, but obviously they're also confused. But nonetheless, there's this aspiration, we all have the same aspiration to realize the truth, to realize the Dharma, to become one with the Buddha, and to have that power to truly benefit and liberate beings. We all have that in common, and because we have that in common, and because we meet together at this time and this place with these teachers, this lineage, these teachings, we're forming a mandala, and that mandala has tremendous potential. It can be very, very powerful, and we make heart connections, we make pranidhanas. We've obviously been connected before because we're connected now. And if we're connected now, we can make pranidhanas to continue to be connected in future lives, so that we can help each other to reach enlightenment. So just our ordinary Dharma companions in the world at this time, and in this, this particular time and place in particular, is already Sangha in a sense, but it's obviously quite flawed as well, in the sense that we are all confused. So you could think what we're relying on is the Sangha of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, I suppose you'd have to say. Bodhisattvas and enlightened beings, great practitioners and yogins, both in the past, because the effect of their practice is still, the adhisthana of it is still with us, and then the present ones, and then the ones to come. So these great practitioners, how are they able to be Sangha for us? They can be Sangha for us even though they are not, they're classed as Sangha and not as Buddha, because the assumption is that they haven't reached final Buddhahood. But the most important thing about them is that they are creating a situation where the Buddha's teachings can come into this world. So sometimes even enlightened beings manifest as Sangha in order to bring the teaching out in the world. If nobody asked for the teaching, then the teachers wouldn't teach. And beings are so confused, they're not going to ask for the teaching, are they, sometimes? So an enlightened person might come along and become Sangha in order for the Buddha to teach. So then the others that are around and connected can receive the teaching. So you can think of Sangha in all sorts of ways. It's, I think some of you have heard of the 5 certainties. A certain teacher, certain teaching in a certain time, in a certain place, to a certain group of people or assembly of people. That's how the Dharma is taught in the world. When those 5 things are there, the teaching can happen. So Sangha is very important in that sense. That's what we're doing. We're creating a teaching situation. So here we're talking about the Arya Sangha, the Sangha of beings who are already well established on the path. So Namo Sangha, because they're by nature clarity, they have seen the kleshas are essenceless. So this is a wonderful verse. It's really the key to the whole thing. But here, they've seen their true nature as clarity, or in DHB terms, we'd say openness, clarity, and sensitivity. They're not different. They're not separate qualities. They're all, openness is clarity. Openness is sensitivity. Sensitivity is clarity. Clarity is sensitivity, and so on. So here it's referred to simply as clarity, which in Sanskrit is prabhasvara, the clear light. That's a bit. No, Sangha. It's so funny when you know something by heart and then you try and remember it in the middle of something else. You can't know it. Yes, it's Ursa. So sometimes that's translated as clear light. So because their nature is this prabhasvara chitta, this clear light that is, it's another word for vidya, actually. It's another word for non-dual jnana, because that is their nature and always, and they know that's their nature, and they know it's always their nature. Then whenever the confusion and negative emotions arise, the greed, hate, and delusion, and all the confusion around that, when they arise, they recognize that they're not anything other than the clouds. So this really points us back to our formless meditation practice, doesn't it? So when you can really recognize and have confidence that your nature is openness, clarity, sensitivity, then when thoughts arise or emotions arise or whatever's arising appears in your awareness, you recognize it's not different from your openness, clarity, and sensitivity. It's almost like something appearing in the mirror of your awareness somehow that doesn't actually disturb it, doesn't actually touch it, doesn't actually stain it. Like you have a clear mirror and something is appearing in it. It could be something horrible. So it could be something disgusting and absolutely awful. But it doesn't affect the mirror. The mirror is completely unaffected by it. And then the next thing that comes up, it'll reflect that. It'll just reflect. There's no break. It just reflects what's there. And the mirror is not affected by it. So when the bodhisattva or when the practitioners reach the stage where they have that confidence in that openness, clarity, sensitivity, that they can let, they can really become totally aware of whatever's coming up, and whatever's coming up tells them more about nature, their mirror-like nature, if you like. They can kind of, even that is the mirror-like nature. There's nothing, actually, nothing can disturb it, nothing can spoil it. So whatever's coming up is welcome, because it's demonstrating again that quality. So it's really yes, this is really the Mahamudra Dzogchen type of meditation, because they've realized that the
mind is
by nature clarity. It is by nature clarity. It isn't that they have to become like that. It's always like that and always was like that. So they don't have to do anything. They've realized that it is by nature clarity. Therefore, with all the conditioned things that are appearing and seem to be wrong, then they're essenceless. So that's the and then
thus they have correctly
penetrated the phenomenal world as not self. Yeah, the Tibetan and Sanskrit is slightly different now. I've done it from the Sanskrit, I hope. The Sanskrit's not that good, but I hope help with it from Sanjukta Cambridge. But so it's either what is it? Penetrated phenomenal world as not self. So this is the famous teaching in Buddhism of not self. I think this is what you expect to be hearing about not self. And so here it is. We're not deviating from orthodoxy here. It's exactly about what is not self. And what is not self is the conditioned phenomenal world of the perception of ordinary beings like ourselves. We perceive things in a confused way. We perceive our body, our personality, our knowledge, our feelings. We perceive all this as being really us, even some kind of essence of who I am that I have to protect. We see that is what I see as myself. And actually all of that is essenceless. You could say it's not self. That is not self. You could say it's not self in the sense that, that idea of myself is just wrong and always was. And that's a huge realization in itself. Or you could say it's not self in the sense of self is my true nature, and this conditioned nonsense is not my true nature. So it's not self in that sense as well. So you can play with it as you like. You'll see some forms of Buddhism, especially Western Buddhism, emphasize that, we have no fixed self and therefore it's all. But then they go on to make a mistake, because then they say the Buddha taught that actually our self was conditioned, but he didn't. He never taught the self was conditioned. The true self is always been nirvana and has always been unconditioned. But yes, certainly what we grasp at being the self, like our body, for example, we grasp at a conditioned phenomenon, and we would like it to be permanent, and we'd like it not to die or not get sick. We'd like it to stay as it is at its peak, or be better than it is. But actually, when you look at it, it doesn't take much to realise that it doesn't stay the same for a minute. That isn't anything of any lasting value or reliability or source of happiness or anything. It's one thing to realise that it's kind of obvious. It's another thing to actually let go of our habits of being extremely concerned about it. But that's why we have to practice. And the same with the other skandhas. I mean, you could make a whole year's course out of teaching this the not self of the skandhas. So You know, this is very orthodox Buddhist stuff. You know, not self is there. You know, it's not trying to argue about that. Just because you're saying that the true nature of our being is Buddha nature is not saying that we therefore still clinging to self. That would be a complete misrepresentation of what's going on. Next one.
Which is peace.
Which is peace. Yes. When you recognize that what you were clinging on to actually never arose, not only is it impermanence, it never arose. It never arose, it never came into existence. It's not existent, non-existent, neither, both, nor either, other. What these skandhas really are is actually nothing other than nirvana itself. The skandhas are, when we grasp at them and think of them as self in that, we think of them as conditioned and we grasp onto them, then that kind of self, you know, is you see through it. You see that that isn't self. But then you see, well, what is the true nature? And this is where it's kind of amazing, really, because our true nature pervades everything always. It never went anywhere. So what we took to be our 5 conditioned skandhas turn out to be Buddha qualities. Every skandha is a Buddha quality. So what we think of as our body is an impermanent, conditioned, feeble sort of thing. But what are we mistaking? We've made a mistake. Our body, if you like, our Buddha body, is the same as the Buddha's body, which can manifest everywhere for the benefit of beings. So that's our true body. So it's not just that we recognize, oh, you know, my body is actually permanent and conditioned and, you know, not reliable. Oh, but that was the one I was clinging to, which never existed. And I was clinging to it because I made a mistake about my real body, which is actually a Buddha body with all the qualities of a Buddha's body, which is, you know, mind-blowing. In every pore, countless, there's sort of universes in every pore of our body, every point of our body is kind of, Buddhas are manifesting everywhere, and our body, even as we move our body, you know, through our volition, we can actually move our body and benefit beings, and it's not actually constrained to this conditioned world. You know, we can move our body and we're actually affecting beings in other worlds, in other universes. Kind of like, we are amazing. We are so amazing. We are so wonderful. We're barely even getting a little inkling of what it means to have Buddha nature. And the same for feeling, same for perceptions and the thought processes and the consciousness. It's all something else. It's something amazing that we've what's the word for it? We've reduced it to a little conditioned version of ourselves that we think we can keep control of. And it's all a mistake. None of that was ever real. It's funny, isn't it? So what's the next one?
All pervading intelligence is unveiled.
Yes.
Sees Buddha
Everywhere. So that's more or less what I've just said, isn't it? I'm using the word intelligence there because, and with the eyes of wisdom, there's another one.
eyes of
Wisdom,
holding the
infinity of pure beings. Yes, that's another image. Eye, the eye of wisdom. Like you close your eye and you can't see anything. But then you open the eye and it's already complete and in functioning. So like we have that Buddha nature functioning, and yet because we've got the eyes closed, it's not able to do much. But if we can open the eye, then actually we see Buddha everywhere, literally, more than just what we think of as everywhere now. It's just like a Buddha here and a Buddha there, all over the place. It's like every point in space is actually pervaded with beings and Buddhas. And all those beings are Buddhas. They haven't realized they're Buddhas. So it's like, however vast and detailed you can think, it's even vaster and more detailed. And it's also accessible. It's not like distance is just a concept, actually, so that everything is actually accessible right now. Countless universes accessible right now, just by a movement of your thought. You can enter all those universes and do things like make offerings to all the Buddhas in all the Buddha fields in a single instant, which we happily recite when we do the kind of just reciting it kind of breaks up a whole sense of limitedness. But it's, the more I practice, the more I realize that it's actually completely, literally true. That is actually true. And I just have this wall of doubt that's holding me back from realizing it. But the more I can contemplate it, and the more I think of Sudana on his journey, all he did was to contemplate it. That's all he needed to do. He just needed to contemplate it, and it awoke in him. So that's a wonderful practice, isn't it? That's can't fail. It's fun at the beginning, fun in the middle, and fun at the end. So this is, I think I've got to the end now, haven't I? The last line where it says the infinity of pure being, the Tibetan translators decided to call it the infinity of all beings. The Sanskrit is ambiguous, and English you have to make a choice. So it could have been all beings, the infinity of pure beings, or it could have been the infinity of pure being, and one could, it could be either or both. So you can play with that a bit. So that they with their eyes of wisdom, the Sangha, the realized beings who are making it possible for the Dharma to appear in the world, they're seeing all the beings that they're helping and bringing to enlightenment. They're seeing that they are already Buddha. So that's why they love us, because they can see us as Buddha. So we must look wonderful to them, mustn't we? Sometimes think that how wonderful we must look to enlightened beings, and how they must how poignant it must be for them when they realize that we don't realize what we are. How could they not realize what they are? They're so wonderful. They're so, yet they don't realize what they are. So a real, genuine love for us. I can really believe that if they can really see us as Buddhas, they would love us, really love us more than we could even conceive of being loved. Not because we're pathetic, but because we're so great. So they're fantastic verses. Does anyone want to ask anything? We've already talked a long time. It's already time to finish.
Maybe we could collect questions and then you could talk about it on your next talk.
Yes. I have been ignoring the camera, I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's been quite a chunk, there's been a crowd of them.
Has there?
Yeah, we had 20 at one point.
Goodness. Hello, everybody. Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, maybe if the camera had been there, but I can't talk here if there are people there. Okay. So if there's not an immediate, is there an immediate question? Okay. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken in the unawakened. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Jeva nyamba mabadam, kone gondu pelmasho. Chanju sani remboche, ma chepanam jejeje. Jeva nyamba mabadam, kone gondu pelmasho. Chanju sani remboche, ma chepanam jejeje. Jeva nyamba mabadam, kone gondu pelmasho.
Maybe the crowd of people out there would like to see the crowd of people in here.
Yeah.
And the chocolate.
And the chocolates, yes. We're going to eat them because we're here.
Right, so here we go. Say hello to everybody. Hello. Yeah.
So can we serve those with the tea?
We've also got people bought mince pies.
Oh,
We've got tea now and mince pies and chocolates because they're already and talking. Let's have box in the hall. There's no meditation day in January.